Christian parenting.
Like, I think when I had a time in my adoption, probably between my first and second, where I was like, everyone should adopt. I can't believe every Christian doesn't adopt. And like, that was like my soapbox. And then I have learned and been a little more quiet and quicker to listen. And adoption isn't for everybody. It's just not, right? Like, you've got to know who you are. You've got to know what you can do. But I do believe it is for more people than are willing or are ready, or not even ready, than have considered it.
Hey, families, welcome back to the Call to Love podcast. Every week, as you know, we dive into the practical, the clinical, and always, most importantly, the biblical aspects of the foster care and adoption callings. Today, I am so excited for this topic. It's been one that has been on my heart and much needed, and the Lord is good in His timing and bringing today's guest to me as we're going to dive into a conversation about adoption and special needs. And this is very common, and we will talk about that with my very special guest today. Heather Avis is a New York Times bestselling author. She is an award-winning podcaster and Down syndrome advocate who founded the Lucky Few movement. She's also an adoptive mom who has spent more than a decade helping those outside of the adoption and Down syndrome communities to create spaces where all children belong, no matter their differences. Heather's got a new book that just released called I Like You So Much, Celebrating What Makes You, You. So excited to dive into this conversation. Heather, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Yes, me too. And you've just been delightful to chat with just even before we hit record today. And so I know you have so much wisdom and insight to share with us. Let's allow our listeners just to get to know you a little bit today. Tell us about your family and just your heart specifically for adoption and special needs.
Yes, let's do the shortest version possible. My husband and I got married in 2002. So whatever the math is, we'll celebrate 23 years this year. And I was very young when we got married, and I thought I had this idea for my life that I would have 3 kids before I was 30 and move on with life, or whatever the ideas are when we're young.
Right.
And about 4 years into our marriage, found out that I couldn't have children naturally. And so went through all the infertility and tried some things, and then got to the crossroads of IVF or adoption, and the personal convictions for me, and even just where I was just weary in the journey.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine doing IVF at that point in my life. And so we chose adoption. And this was in 2006. And in 2006, I didn't know anyone who had adopted.
Yeah.
So we were like, what do we even do? How do we even go this way? And we were introduced to a family through a coworker of mine. I was a teacher at the time, who had adopted. And so we met them, could like see ourselves in the story, and then went down that path. And we chose at the time a private agency, because our goal, while we had like let the Lord, like we had released the control that we thought we needed over how we were going to have a family. We're like, well, let's just transfer that control to the child we will adopt. Because there's this idea, I think it's a false idea in adoption, that you can have some control.
Right.
So we chose a private agency because we wanted a healthy infant. And that's usually your best bet towards a healthy infant, is a private agency. Fill out all the paperwork, checked no to the majority of things, said yes to a couple of things. And then we got this email, a passing email from our social worker. We've been awaiting family for about a year, which in adoption, I feel like in the adoption world, it's like dog years, like
So
it's
true.
only been a year, but it's been a decade. Like, I have to wait
Right.
one more day
Yes.
for the baby to find me and me to find this baby. It's brutal.
Yes.
And so we got this email in passing that was just like, your profile's been viewed a couple of times. We just had 2 babies with Down syndrome placed in our agency. Hang in there. Like, things are slow. And as soon as I read that, we had said no to Down syndrome. We had said no to congenital heart defects. We had said no to so many things that my daughter, who would end up being my daughter, was on paper. But I just couldn't unknow it. And I was like, this is not, this is not the plan. So what am I even, why am I even considering? And I said something to my husband about it. And he's like, I think we should pray about this. And I thought, no, that we shouldn't pray about this. We should say no and keep waiting, for this baby that we want. Very long story, but we found out about her, and then some things happened. We decided, okay, we're just going to learn more. And then we learned some more information, and she was no longer considered adoptable. And then we're like, well, that was weird. And a couple of
Right.
months went by, and we got a phone call, and they said, that little girl we told you about, we've learned some more things about her health, and we are looking for an adoptive placement. Are you still interested? So we're like, we want to learn more. And as we learn more about her, Down syndrome became this back burner issue because she had a congenital heart defect that would require open heart surgery. She had a lung condition called pulmonary hypertension, which was primary, not because of her heart. That would mean maybe she would only live to be 5 or 6 years old. She would be on
Mm,
oxygen. So all of a sudden, we're like, wait a second, Lord. We were open to Down syndrome. What are you doing? Like,
right.
now we've got a medically fragile baby. I'm 27 years old. Like, what? I was at 26 actually. I'm 26 years old. Like, what? We don't have to do this, right? We can say no to that. So I always say our step, our journey towards her was like one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Um, our yes was more we couldn't say no, and it ended up being, I call it like my whispery yes, and then
Yes.
and my scariest and best yes. And we had met with a cardiologist. It's a very very long story, but we ended up in a Costco parking lot. The Lord gave me a vision, and it was a vision of, and I this is like 17 years later, and I can cry every time, like handing me a beautifully wrapped package that I've been like wanting a gift, and I open it and go, oh, this is what I asked for, and handing it back to God, and the Lord being like, just this idea of like, what are you doing handing me back the gift that I've given you? Like,
Wow.
this is a gift. She is a gift. And then also overwhelmed by this idea of, if she lives one day, oh, look at me, Tramp. If she lives one day, or if she lives a lifetime, you get to be her mom. Like, that is the honor. This will be the honor of your life. And so she's my scariest and best yes. And we said yes to her. And that just like changed our life forever, forever and for the better. And she came home at 3.5 months old. And I remember holding her and looking at her and thinking, like that night, just like, what was I so afraid of? Like, this is a baby. Like, you're a baby. Oh my gosh, this tiny little baby in my arms, and you're so cute. And what was I so afraid of? And so then when we pursued she had heart surgery, and her lung condition is totally healed. And the long story, the shortest version is she's completely healthy. She's almost going to be 17.
Wow.
She's our absolute miracle. And then we started the process for our next adoption. And the Lord had really done a 180 in my heart and in my understanding of adoption. I didn't have a lot of understanding of adoption when we did our first one.
Same. Yeah.
And so I had learned so much. And so we chose to go through our foster care system. Um, and we were open to almost anything. Any child, we were open to sibling sets, we were open to messing up birth order, we were open to disability. I mean, we just checked yes to most boxes. And we got a phone call for a little girl who was 5 months old and had no disabilities, had no drug exposure in utero, which is really unheard of, had some
Yeah.
family history that made it so an adoption plan was necessary. And did we want her? And we said absolutely. So we
Yeah.
brought her home. Her name's Truly. We were told a Hispanic baby, and then she came home. We're like, she's really dark complexion, and learned that um, she's half black, half Guatemalan. And
Okay.
so my husband and I are both Caucasian. Our oldest daughter is Armenian, full 100% Armenian, but racially she's white. And then just when life was full to the brim with like a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old who were needed as much for me as I could give, we
Yeah.
got a phone call about a woman who has got an in utero diagnosis for Down syndrome and a congenital heart defect. And she's a single mom, and chose an adoption plan for her son and chose us. And so a couple months after learning about him, he was born, and we went to the hospital the day he was born. And his name is August, and he also has Down syndrome. And that was 11 years ago. And here we are. That's the shortest version of my three little munchkins.
Oh, that is so beautiful, Heather. Thank you for sharing that. And I was tearing up right with you just as you were sharing that, because it is every adoption, I think, is our scariest and best yes. And the Lord puts families together. He forms families, and it's so beautiful how he does that. And I love that you talk about the control factor, because I am the queen of this false illusion of control. and have really wrestled with that for a number of years and still wrestling with that, if I'm being honest. And so, as you're talking about that, maybe I would love for you to speak a little more into, because obviously, as a mom with no previous experience to, medically fragile components of the adoption, the transracial components, all the different things, how do you balance learning without grasping onto control?
I call myself a recovering control freak.
Yeah,
I think raising kids and raising little kids with medical issues, there is such a desire and it feels like a need to hold on real tight to all of
yeah,
it and to make it be something that we want it to be, like to force the outcome, to control it.
that's so
Um,
good.
but at the end of the day, it's not real. Like we can't control anything. That is
Yeah,
just the truth of it. And I think for me, a lot of the letting go of my control was in my infertility journey. Um, I like the Lord really was working in my life in that journey, and then there wasn't as much holding on tight once my kids came to me, but it was this like then we held on tight in adoption. We're like, oh, it doesn't matter what we do, and not that our actions matter, right? But at the end of the day, the outcome we cannot control an outcome
that's
for
right.
anybody outside of ourselves, right? Like we can control the things we say and do and how we respond and the work that we do in our own lives, but
Right.
for anybody outside of me, I will never be able to control the outcome. And people learn this like through addiction, right? Like when you're in AA and an addiction, you're like, oh, the first thing you kind of go to is like, oh, I have no control, I can't
Yeah.
control the people outside of me. So it really is, it's this truth that I think humans, we have to learn through the going through it, unfortunately. Um, and the more that I've released, I think my husband and I now, even when life comes at us in different ways and things are tricky, it's like we try to really have a palms open posture.
Hmm.
Uh, this is what we're hoping for. We're going to work hard towards this, but we're not going to hold it with our fists clenched. We have to have
Yeah.
our palms open. And yeah, infertility, adoption, disability, transracial, like all of that is just so big. And once we've let go of control, I have found a lot of freedom in that, a lot of peace there. Like that's where the peace is for me when I step aside, like step out of needing control. It's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do my best here because I can
Right.
control that,
Yes.
and then we're gonna trust that the outcomes are covered by a good God and that we can do it. We can do it.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. So, so wise. And it is true. There is so much freedom to be experienced on the other side of that release and that surrender. And I'm recovering in that as well. It's still ongoing and have that fleshy tendency to revert back and go, whoa, wait a minute. No, I don't want to go back there. So I love that you share that. I'm curious, just in your work and founding the Lucky Few movement and just having your eyes opened truly to special needs, specifically Down syndrome, but other, medically fragile and all of that. What for our listeners maybe who might be wrestling with the potential of, like, they're scared of that phone call of, hey, we have a child for you, but there's this diagnosis, associated with this child. What is the prevalence of the need of children who are special needs or medically fragile, and what advice would you have for those who are desperate, like you talked about? And I can share that desperation and the dog years mentality of waiting and waiting for that fulfillment. Can you speak to our listeners who might be sitting in the tension of that right now?
Oh gosh, I guess I can. I'll do my best. I There's so many things to unpack in all of that.
Yeah.
I want to start here if it's okay. The Lucky Few, it is a movement that I started because I realized how lucky I was to have a child with Down syndrome, and the narrative I had had prior to that was like, don't do this. Like, say no. This is sad. Even when we announced that we were going to bring her home, it was like, it wasn't like, yes, congratulations. It's like, oh, are you sure? Um,
Hmm.
and then after this like false narrative that our society shares, the story about Down syndrome, I realized is not true, and how overwhelmed I felt with like luck and feeling blessed to be her mom, and then realizing like, oh wait, a lot of people in the Down syndrome community, parents feel this way as well.
Right.
So that's been the work of the Lucky Few. Is I call that shifting the narrative around Down syndrome. And what I have to recognize is both of my kids who have Down syndrome, if they didn't have that diagnosis, and if there wasn't a false, harmful narrative around it, they would have been parented by their birth families, and there wouldn't have been this destructive ripping apart.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's this mystery that I've discovered in adoption where I believe God's initial plan was to keep these families intact because God is not a God of destruction.
Right.
And God knew always and planned for me to be their mom. It's
Yes.
conflicting, right? It's
Yeah.
contradictory, um, and it's a mystery. But I
Yeah.
think God is grieved at the fact that these families aren't connected, like didn't stay together.
Yeah.
So there's this narrative that's false and harmful. That narrative broke apart these families and almost kept me from saying yes to adopting them. So I encourage people to do a little heart check. What is the thing that you are saying? What is your narrative around saying no to adopting a child with a disability? And where did it come from? And likely it came from society because we can't know what we don't know, right? And
Right.
if you've never been in relationship with people with disability, you've never been a parent to a child with a disability, then you can't know it, and that's fair, right? So
Yeah.
where is it coming from? And also recognizing and being okay with maybe it isn't something that is for you. Like I think when I had a time in my adoption, probably between my first and second, where I was like, everyone should adopt. I can't believe every Christian doesn't adopt. Um, and like that was like my soapbox. And then I have learned and been a little more quiet and quicker to listen. And adoption isn't for everybody. It's just not,
True.
right? Like you've got to know who you are. You've got to know what you can do. But I do believe it is for more people than are willing or are
Yeah.
ready, or not
Yeah.
even ready, than have considered it.
Yeah.
So I think it is like this a heart check, right? Like if you're listening, you're thinking, I do not want a child with disability. Like I've heard these stories. I was in that seat. Like, oh, I heard this story. Good for you. That's such a sweet story. Please, dear Lord, don't let that be my story.
Mm.
I would encourage you to just release like that open hand posture of I'm willing to step into a thing that I don't know. Like I'm
Yeah.
willing to step towards a thing that towards a child that maybe I feel scared of. Um, be willing to take that step in that direction with openness, knowing that you're. I just feel like I believe that God's goodness is so big, and God goes behind us and beside us and before us that there isn't going to be a misstep. We're going to
Yes.
step where we need. We're going to make it to the place we need to go.
So good.
So, but we have to be open to it. I think back to like if I was not open, if the Lord had not completely like destroyed my heart when I learned about this little girl with Down syndrome, I think my life would have been fine. Like if we had waited for that healthy baby, I don't think God was like, I will withhold from you. No, my husband and I, our family would have grown and we would have been fine, but we wouldn't have what we have. And I can't even imagine. I mean, I'm not joking. Every single day I look at my kids and especially my oldest with Down syndrome because she changed it all. And I can't even believe I get to do this. Like, I'm so unbelievably grateful for this good story
Yeah.
that I was able to step into. So that was a lot to
I
say.
love it. I
But
love it. So, so rich in truth and wisdom. Oh my goodness. I love it. And just to to sit with you in your heart and just hear that, it's just beautiful and it is inspiring. And it begs the question, like, okay, Lord, search my heart
mm,
and let's give it to him and allow him to just do the work that he has ordained, like you're talking about. I absolutely love that. You talked about the narrative and just the fear related to that. And ideally, Heather, we live in a world and we're parenting our kids in a world where there aren't those negative viewpoints. There's not the fear. There's not just connotations associated with how our children are born and the conditions that they are born with and that sort of a thing. So how do you, as a Christian parent on the daily, to combat those narratives without being angry or frustrated with against the narrative, but you're working for your children rather than against the narrative? What does that balance look like?
it's really good. It's a good question. Um, The reality is that when my kids, all three of them in their own ways, unique ways, step outside our front door, they are stepping into a world that questions their value and worth.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just true. And there's this, my middle daughter especially, right? Like she is the only person in the family who's Black. She's the only person in the family who doesn't have a sibling who doesn't have a disability. She's sandwiched between two people with Down syndrome.
Right.
We have relationships with birth families for both my kids with Down syndrome. We know nothing about her birth family. There's all these pieces that she's holding.
Right.
Uh, so learning as a parent to come alongside her, like we're not going to fix it, we're going to
Right.
help her, right? We're not going to ignore it. We're not going to like say don't feel that. It's like no, this
Yeah.
coming alongside. So within our home there's a coming alongside and a joining in and a holding. Like I see you and I'm sad too. Like this makes me sad too. Not you're fine. Look how lucky you are to be in our family, you know?
Right.
So there's that piece. But then also parenting them in this world that questions their worth. I have, and I'm an advocate in my job. And so I am often out, like up on a stage, not a real stage sometimes, but like on my soapbox of, you know, challenging cultural narratives and norms and saying this is like, look at where what we're missing when we don't include people with disability and all things. But
Yeah.
my home is, I say, my home is radically inclusive. Like my home is a place where my children will never question their belonging. They will never question if they are enough. They will never question if they should be there or not.
Right.
It's just established. It's the foundation on which our home has been established. And so I have to believe when we're dealing with things happening in school settings or in community or rejection at a dance class or at a church, even whatever it is,
Yeah.
that they're going to walk through our front door knowing that they always have a safe place to be exactly who they are, that they
Yes.
don't have to bend and flex and adjust. They get to be who God made them to be and be embraced fully in my home. And my husband and I get to decide that, you know, like we get to lay that foundation
Yeah.
um, and make that anyone who walks through our front door can feel that and know that. And that's the expectation. So I have to, when things are really overwhelming in the world and how my kids are viewed and what they face every day, I have to believe and know that that um, matters deeply.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And that goes to that control piece that we just talked about. Like you can control the culture of your home.
Yeah.
You can't control what happens when they step outside, but you can advocate, you can influence in the most positive of ways, and you can create that felt safety in your home. And I think that's beautiful. Can you give us some practical examples of how you do that?
I think if we're talking specifically adoption and thinking of who's listening, thinking of our audience, and I touched on this a little bit, but like my daughter truly, over the years since she was little, will have moments of feeling really sad about being adopted, you know, or
Mm,
like being confused by it. And just that she knows she can feel that and
yeah.
that it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Like we've never said to Truly or any of our kids, look at this amazing family you have. You're so lucky that you have us.
Yeah.
Because that's not helpful. And we're not trying to undo her reality. Like she has to live with it. And I can never fully understand it. I had
Right.
two parent home who chose me, right? Like where I lived and I grew up. I will never fully understand. So that like being empathetic and stepping towards her. So allowing, I think an example would be allowing those conversations to take place in our
Yeah.
home. And then we a part of this too, I write books and I've written some children's books and using those as tools for conversation. So we are listeners and learners in our home. We talk about this all the time. I said earlier, we always talk about you can't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
and this idea of like know better, do better. So if I remember once Truly when she was little, like pointed at a woman out in public who had something called a port wine stain on her face, like half her face was like a purplish color
Yes.
and Truly pointed at her, as toddlers will do, and said, "What's wrong with her?" And I said, "Okay,
Mm,
nothing's wrong with her. She's just different." But by the time Truly was a toddler in our home, we had established that people are different and that different is good.
yes.
Um, and so then it ended there. And then when we got home, we can dive deeper. So this is kind of just the culture of that belonging and inclusion
Yeah.
in our home. Like, okay, you notice the thing about someone that's different. Yeah, I always notice things that are different. So inviting our kids into being curious, fostering curiosity, encouraging curiosity over judgment. So when somebody, so yeah, it's just a way that we've established how things are in our house, like the conversations we have.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if
I
that.
love that. Yeah, that answers that beautifully. I love that. And what I'm hearing from you is that's just intentional parenting.
Sure.
You are aware, you're available, and you're purposeful with how you interact in those conversations, and you are honoring the Lord, honestly, and how you are guiding their worldview. And I love that you talk about that. Different is not bad, different is beautiful. And let's celebrate that rather than be afraid of it or point and criticize and shy away. So I'm curious as I was reading through just some of and thinking about even just the title of your new book, I Like You So Much. You talk about how telling kids I like you can even be more powerful than saying I love you.
Mm,
So unpack that for us, and
sure.
I think it's really intriguing.
Yes, I will start by saying there's nothing bigger than love, right? Like
Yes.
there's nothing bigger or more powerful. But there's also, especially from a mother to a child or a parent or a caregiver to a child, it's kind of like an unspoken, where it's like, yeah, yeah, I know you love me, right? Like
Yeah.
I love you so much, sweetheart. Yeah, yeah. Like it's just so obvious.
Right.
In a home where there is love, it's not something you need to be reminded of. It's just
Right.
there.
Sure.
But when I know for me, like if I know someone loves me and they say, I love you, it's like, yeah, I love you too. But when they're like, Heather, I really like you. Like, I like the way that you do this thing. I like that you are who you are. There's like a power to it because there's almost an intentionality behind it, um, rather than it's just unspoken. It's like, oh no, I like you. I like who you are. You're so rad. And I like that you're here in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you feel it even kind of when
Yeah,
you say it?
absolutely.
And so being thoughtful and intentional in letting our kids know, of course we love them. They know that. We don't have they know it because it's established in the fabric of our relationship.
Yeah.
But for me to say, "Hey, I like you. You're 14," and I don't say that. All I do is say this part, and you drive me nuts. Like this is so hard.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
guess what? I really, really like you. You're such a cool
Mm.
kid. And then being specific in telling them what we like about them that isn't putting pressure on them to have to perform or have
Yeah.
to live up to a standard because our society already is doing that
Right.
pretty significantly. And I
Yeah.
want my kids to know that who they are as they are so loved. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to grow into our best
Right.
selves, right?
Right.
But oh
Right.
no, no. The goodness, like I see Jesus in you. You are an image bearer of the creator. That
Yeah.
goodness is intrinsic. There's nothing you can do or not do that is going to strip you of that.
Right.
I like you so much just the way you are. And you don't have to do this thing or be this way for me to like you. I just like you
Yeah.
because you're
That's
you.
so good. I love that. It makes me think of the TBRI principle and practice of mirroring their preciousness.
Mm,
And that's doing that through your words and you looking them in the eyes and you saying these things that are just affirming and just reminding them of their value. And I think that's just amazing and how that builds connection and trust. And then just further solidifies that culture in your home that you're talking about building. I
yeah,
absolutely love that, Heather. It's so amazing. You mentioned the hard, and so we've talked about a lot of really amazing positive things in our conversation so far. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't address
sure.
and give honor to the hard. And so, what does that look like for you? Maybe a season or just an ongoing hard that you are just really leaning into the Lord to sustain you through.
Yes. It is not all rainbows and unicorns raising kids with disabilities and adoption. It is so hard on the daily. And
Yeah,
it's the hard of something that's been consistent, that's not seasonal, is holding their sweet little hearts at the loss of their birth families. Um, all three of my kids, over the years, in different ways, will express that. Sometimes it comes out of nowhere. Sometimes it's because we just had a visit and they're confused and holding that. I'm confused, my heart is burdened, and then holding my little sweet child's heart in a thing that they had no control over, that they
right.
had no say in, that they're feeling sad about. And then that's conflicting for me too. Like,
Sure.
but I'm a great mom. But that doesn't it doesn't question that. That's not the conversation. But that is a consistent hard thing. I don't know if you feel that too as an adoptive parent, that this is their reality, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a woman who I really admire who's in her 70s and she was adopted as an infant, and she'll tell her story as like it was the greatest adoption, like in if you could put it on paper, like the best possible adoption scenario. And
Yeah.
she said, even in my 70s, I think about it every single day about about my birth mom and about me
Wow.
not being accepted by her. She's like, and she's done therapy. I mean, she's done the work. It's just the reality, and it's
Right.
hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
And then with disability, I we just continue to live in a world that questions the value and worth of a disabled person,
Right.
and it is a heavy burden to hold. So that is something that I wish wasn't true. And I think about like how my kids are experiencing the world around them. That's out of our control, and that's really hard. It's really
Yeah.
hard. And then teenagers are so hard. Everybody don't if you don't have teenagers yet, it's great. It is. There's so much fun about it, but it's like,
There is.
oh my gosh, this is a lot. And then you've
Yes.
got all those identity pieces. It's so layered in an adoptive story. It's
Yeah.
so layered. Like my middle daughter, True, and she doesn't mind me sharing this, but I she's black and she goes into a world where she's seen as black, but then sometimes she's called an Oreo, like this idea that black on the
Yeah.
outside, white on the inside. She
Yep.
can't help that she's raised by white parents, right? Like
Right.
who were raised by white parents. So being intentional in letting her have racial mirrors and understand, trying my best to step into her story with her is so hard. It's so hard every day.
Yeah.
It's so hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you being honest about that. I have a friend who's an adult adoptee, and she has had the same experience of just the name calling and the you don't fit in there, even though you look like these,
Yeah.
this group of people, but you feel like you don't fit in here because you don't look that. And there's that tension. And gosh, we just need the Lord. Ultimately, I think that's where we've both landed, right, Heather? Of just we just
Right.
need the
Right.
Lord to help us to navigate this well. And so thankful for his grace that even when I'm flawed and how I respond to it, because I'm very like I cannot stand injustice. And so I just want to go
Yeah.
fix it all. And I can't. And the Lord knows that. And so surrendering to the wrestling with the injustice of it all and the hurt, like you're talking about the hard, I absolutely can relate to all of that. And I think many of our listeners can as well. And it's just, you worded it beautifully and explained it beautifully. And it gives voice, because I think that's another reason why we do Called to Love is to give voice in this space. It can be very isolating. People don't understand. And we are carrying all these hard things on the regular and living in a broken world. And, but yet it's the best yes we've ever given. But it
Yeah.
is hard, and we need to have permission to say that. So I love everything that you have shared, and I'm just so grateful. I want to make sure that our listeners can connect with you further. They can get a copy of this beautiful book. I absolutely love, love, love. You kind of mentioned, alluded to it too. When we started, we knew nothing. There was no education. There were fewer resources, and so we've stumbled and bumped and done things really hard and struggled. But I'm so grateful for now, and
Yes.
the obedience of families like yours, and so many more resources that we have available, and to introduce conversation, to make it a safe space for conversation, to affirm our kids, to support our kids. And that's just the goodness of God. So we're gonna thank him for that blessing. And I love getting to share every time I hear of resources like yours. And so I want to make sure that our listeners can have access to I Like You So Much, celebrating what makes you you, and then just connecting with you further if special needs is a part of their story or might be a part of their story. So how can they do that?
Yes, I love these. I want to give a quick shout out to adoptees who are telling their stories and
Yeah,
birth mothers who are telling their stories. It's such a
absolutely.
necessary person. And if you are starting in the adoption process or you're anywhere in it, and those two categories you have yet to tap into, find them on social media, find the books that they've written, find the articles. It's so invaluable for
So
us.
good.
Like, because I'm in neither of those categories. So you can go to heatheravis.com. On social media, we are the Lucky Few Official. And I Like You So Much is in bookstores everywhere, but there's links to any of my books on heatheravis.com.
Fantastic. Okay, friends, I know you've been blessed by Heather today. Heather, I have been blessed by you. It has just been so encouraging just to sit and to hear your story and what the Lord's continuing to do in and through you. So thank you so much for giving of your time. And we're just praying blessings on your continued ministry and work. So thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to Called to Love today. I love to hear from listeners, and so I would love to connect with you to hear your stories and answer your questions right here on the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, send me a direct message, or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I pray you have been encouraged by today's episode to walk in faith and continue to embrace your own call to love. Until next time, blessings, sweet friends.